Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches English Language and Literature A-Level. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Tim Collins' Eve of Battle speech taken from the Voices in Speech and Writing Anthology, part of the Edexcel A-Level. I'm going to take you through some interesting elements of context, focusing in on some details about the Iraq War and the circumstances of the speech itself. We'll have a little look at genre, audience and purpose before taking a glance at a few key moments of the speech. I'll give you some descriptors for voice, and then we'll underpin all of that with some linguistic and literary analysis. So let's get started. Okay, so just a couple of interesting points to discuss about this speech. So this was delivered by Tim Collins on the 19th of March 2003 to the 1st Battalion Royal Irish Regiment Battle Group. This is literally just as they are about to invade or enter Iraq. They're stationed in Kuwait, and I know it's called an Eve of Battle speech, but it was a couple of days before they went in. So the Iraq War in 2003, that went on obviously for a considerable period of time, was all to do with the US and the UK's belief that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Since then, it has been proven that that wasn't actually the case, and when they invaded Iraq, they found no trace of weapons of mass destruction. And you know, in recent days, there's been a lot in the news about Tony Blair and his kind of decision-making process. But at the time, although the UK were very convinced that this was the case because they'd had some intelligence, it later was discovered that that intelligence was faulty, and it was a sort of a part of a kind of plot to get people to go in and oust Saddam Hussein. But this kind of these sort of issues surrounding the decision-making process for going into the Iraq War, because a lot of the countries were dead against it, might inform some of the choices that Tim Collins made when inspiring the troops. So just on gap, now, as I said, this is an Eve of Battle speech, which means that obviously you've got this primary audience of the soldiers. Now, quite often when people write kind of big military speeches, they have an awareness that it's going for publication and it's something that will be looked at and recorded and all the likes. But apparently Tim Collins actually did this sort of quite spontaneously, with no kind of suggestion that it was going to be broadcasted or transcribed. And so it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm sure he planned it to a degree because he would have known that he was going to sort of motivate the troops. But it's not that kind of carefully crafted piece of rhetoric, like, for example, the JFK piece. And so that might account for some of the sort of shifts into colloquialisms that we see. So his primary audience is, of course, the soldiers, but it turned out that it was going to have a lasting global audience because it's become incredibly famous. Now, there was a woman in the room whose name was Sarah Oliver. She was writing for the Mail on Sunday, and she actually transcribed it in shorthand. And it's her transcription that has then been made famous. And, you know, it's been performed by Kenneth Branagh as a kind of drama adaptation of it. But it's quite interesting that in terms of what has become such a famous speech. Now, in terms of what the purpose was, obviously, this is all about inspiration and motivation, and about kind of inciting that sort of sense of bravery and honor in the soldiers, because this is obviously an incredibly frightening thing, and they know that they are facing death. So yeah, they have to have that kind of rousing speech. But what's interesting is, as much as it is about motivation, it's also quite cautionary. And there's a lot in the speech which is all about dignity and respect and how to treat people and how to behave yourself. So it's also setting out some kind of rules, some etiquette of behavior in this context. Okay, so let's start off with our little opening bit here, which is straight away going in for inspirational tone and certainly very purposeful and authoritative. So look at this declarative complex sentence to kick off the show. We go to liberate, not to conquer. Okay, so you've got antithesis there between these two verbs, liberate, conquer. One to do with freedom, the other one to do with sort of imperialist control. So it's stating the objective and the purpose to be very, very kind of moralistic. They're on the side of the good. This isn't about conquering and taking over and invading. It's about freedom. So it kind of puts them on the right side. And then we get this development of that idea about not conquering. And you can see that through the sort of negation here. We will not fly our flags in their country. So this is a collocation, and it's almost synecdoche actually in itself, flying the flag being a representation for taking the land, for conquering. But we will not fly our flags in this country, i.e. we won't conquer. We are entering Iraq to free a people. The only flag will be flown in that ancient land is their own. So you've got this lovely euphemism here. We are entering Iraq. We're just going in for a little stroll. So it's negating the kind of negative viewpoint of people going into another person's country. We're not using the word invasion. We're using entering because we're sticking with the notion of liberation, not conquering. We've got the repetition of the image of the flag, and but just developed slightly, again, kind of giving power. It's very much empowering the Iraqi people because it's their flag that will be flown. So again, focusing in on that notion of liberation, and note how that is developed here in this verb to free a person. We've also got very, very positive descriptions of Iraq. Through describing it as an ancient land, reminding us that this is a place of history, and that's going to be developed later on in the speech with some biblical allusions. So this is that first kind of point of demonstrating how Iraq needs to be protected. And then this is all summed up in one imperative simple sentence: show respect for them. Okay, so it's certainly very purposeful and authoritative, but again, it's this idea about being cautionary. Yeah, it's stated positively, but there's a warning in there about behaviour. Okay, so we've got all sorts going on here in the voice because it's both euphemistic and colloquial, whilst managing to also be aggressive at the same time. So Tim Collins is getting that combination, I suppose, between softening what needs to be softened, but also kind of inspiring them to get going. So check out the vague language in this first sentence. There are some who are alive at this moment who will not be alive shortly. Now, I mean, that is extraordinary euphemism. Is trying to say, it's trying to kind of hide the word dead. We're going to kill some people. So he goes from alive to not alive, juxtaposing just with that negation. And we also have these adverbs of time: at this moment, and then shortly. So again, a reminder of the sort of urgency. And again, that vague language is created through the indefinite pronoun. There are some. So he's not stating who that some are. Are we talking about Iraqi soldiers? Are we talking about civilians? It's deliberately vague. And then this euphemism is continued, but he develops into a metaphor. Those who do not wish to go on that journey, we will not send. Journey being a euphemistic metaphor for death. So he's saying surrender and we'll treat you well. But he's saying that to the soldiers. So he's reminding that if anyone surrenders, you honour that. As for the others, again, nicely vague, this collective noun, the others, i.e. the people that fight. I expect you to rock their world. Now we're talking about that colloquialism. I said that it was meant to be a little bit off the cuff, this speech. And so these sort of very sneaky colloquialisms, actually quite an American phrase, rocking their world. It's often got quite positive connotations, like suggestion of impression, like making an impression and excitement. But here it's about shaking things up. And again, it works as a metaphor. It works as a euphemism for kill them a lot. Note the way that we shift our pronouns here. We've gone from we, Tim Collins and the soldiers together in this. But because he's actually giving them this sort of motivational moment about how they're going to sort of wreak down violence on those who deserve it, he moves to I expect you. So it's a demonstration of the relationship that he has with them here, that he understands that they want to make him proud as well. And then this aggression, this kind of call to action that is motivating in an aggressive way, is developed with another colloquialism, an imperative: wipe them out. Yeah, I mean, that's massively emotive. That's total destruction, you know. So it's the most aggressive, certainly for this part. But he hedges this. He softens that aggression. Check out the use of conditional tense in the subordinate clause, okay? And think about the agency. If that is what they choose, nice vague third person pronoun, again relating to the others. So the suggestion is that they only commit these acts of violence if it is the choice of the other side. So it's actually limiting their culpability and their responsibility for their own violent acts. And again, that's tempered. But if you are ferocious in battle, note the frontal coordinate conjunction, suggesting we're getting a kind of flip side. Remember to be magnanimous in victory. So quite heightened language here in this moment, low frequency lexis. We've got lovely antithesis once again, ferocious in battle, can't say that word, magnanimous in victory. So again, it's cautionary. It's reminding the soldiers of expectations for benevolence and righteousness in victory. And also notice, if again we're using conditional tense, there's a lot of conditional tense in this speech. If you are ferocious in battle, so that's where the choice is. See how the notion of victory is sort of it's inevitable. You must be magnanimous in victory. So there's no kind of suggestion of doubt in that second part of the subordinate clauses. The main clauses will remember to be magnanimous in victory, which again suggests victory will happen. So that's very motivating. Right, the cautionary continues. Just like the respect that shone through that noun phrase, ancient land, we now have this development of it. Iraq is steeped in history. Okay, so a continuation of that idea with that metaphor, steeped, suggesting that you can see evidence of the richness of culture and history everywhere you look. And then a qualification of that. It is the site of the Garden of Eden, of the Great Flood, and the birthplace of Abraham. So we've got this triad that all is consisting of biblical allusion. Okay, so he's tying the history of the place to aspects of their own culture as well, this religious culture, and reminding them of the importance of this site to them and to the people of Iraq. And then you get the sort of purpose, tread lightly there, imperative. So again, it's cautionary about respect. Okay, more focus on that notion of inspiration, whilst also being commanding. So we've got this declarative sentence: you will see things that no man could pay to see, and you will have to go a long way to find a more decent, generous and upright people than the Iraqis. So we've got this little triad, and that triad of adjectives are all very, very positive in tone, all about righteousness. And so it's setting the Iraqi people with them, because they're here for a righteous reason as well. So it's a reminder of why they're here. They're protecting morally good people, righteous people. Their children will be poor. In years to come, they will know that the light of liberation in their lives was brought by you. We don't have much of this, but this is one of those kind of self-congratulatory moments that expect gratitude. People will know you'll go down in history for doing this wonderful thing. And that's obviously really created through the notion of the metaphor. And that metaphor is highlighted by the use of continuing alliteration, light, liberation in lives. And we've got this passive voice that almost creates something quite humble, because the agency, you know, their action is left to the end, and then the focus is put on those people, on those poor children who will grow up to have a better life. Going back now, there's a slight shift in tone. We move into another conditional structure. If there are casualties of war, then remember. So let's just start with that bit. So we've got euphemistic language again with casualties of war, and the whole thing has a euphemistic feel because of that conditional. Of course there are going to be casualties of war. Of course there are. They're invading Iraq. But look at what he says about those casualties. Remember that when they woke up and got dressed in the morning, they did not plan to die this day. So you get this quite anecdotal tone, and it's all about reminding the soldiers that the casualties of war are people. It's not clear whether he's talking about soldiers or civilians. In some ways, it doesn't matter there. It makes me think it's civilians, the idea that they did not plan to die this day. Like there's a sort of sense of they don't have control over this, where soldiers perhaps might be aware of that. But again, it's this notion of respect. So we've got further imperatives: allow them dignity and death, lovely place of alliteration there. And then bury them properly and mark their graves. So this is not just about the way that they're killed, it's the manner that they're dealt with afterwards. Okay, shift in tone along with subject, because here Tim Collins starts talking about the enemy. There are many regional commanders who have stains on their souls, and they are stoking the fires of hell for Saddam. Okay. Very emotive language. Much of that is to do with the kind of biblical references being made here. The notion of souls, the fires of hell. Note the way that he sort of very much is like, hell is waiting for Saddam Hussein. Again, the idea of the inevitability of his death. These metaphors, the stains on their soul, the idea of corruption. So again, Tim Collins and the troops are on the side of goodness and righteousness, and so there's this real kind of juxtaposition between their righteousness and then this kind of very traditional imagery of evil. And again, that's also emphasized through that sibilant repetition: stain, stole, stoking, Saddam. It's obviously very hyperbolic as well. He and his forces will be destroyed by this coalition for what they have done. Okay, so again, passive construction. It's, they are the ones that will be doing the destroying, but instead the emphasis is placed on who will be destroyed, so on the enemy. And note the modal verbs of certainty here: will be destroyed, so there's absolutely no doubt that this will happen. And again, there's this kind of idea about responsibility and culpability. It's for what they have done. Cut a little bit out there. And then you've got another imperative. It's another call to action: show them no pity. So when it comes to the real enemy, those who are stoking the fires of hell, those are the people that are shown no pity, that get wiped out, that will have their worlds rocked. Everyone else, the Iraqi people, they're dealt with respect and civility. That's the kind of message coming through. And this idea about morality and being cautionary in tone is really explicit in this bit. There is a real sense of kind of threat. The fact that Tim Collins is needing to kind of make this statement to his troops is quite interesting. Note conditional tense. Okay, so he is saying it's not that I think this will happen, but if it were to happen. If you harm the regiment or its history, so note that we're getting this idea about reputation here, by over enthusiasm in killing. Now that's a euphemism if I've ever heard one. Over enthusiasm in killing. Or in cowardice, the other big issue that a soldier could face in this moment. No, it is your family who will suffer. Wow, what a kind of emotive, cautionary threat there. Okay, and again, modal verbs suggesting certainty: who will suffer. Repeated again here: you will be shunned unless your conduct is of the highest. So that's superlative adjective there. Again, drawing attention to the expectations for code of conduct. For your deeds will follow you down through history. Now, I think this repetition of the noun your deeds is really important, because the only other time he said deeds is when he's talking about the criminal acts of the enemies, the atrocities of the enemy. Here, deeds can have two meanings. It can the same thing. It'd be like if you have misconduct, if you have over enthusiasm in killing, that is a deed, which we don't want to talk about. But if your deeds are good and honest and just, that also will follow you down through history. Note we move back into first person plural as opposed to second person address there. We will bring shame on neither our uniform or our nature. Again, more modal verbs of certainty. We've got the synecdoche here for the uniform is of course representative of the whole of the armed forces in this moment. You could call it metaphor as well, but synecdoche is probably the more precise term. And all through this little cautionary moment, we've got this semantic field of dishonour. It's interesting that he goes for the semantic field of dishonour as opposed to the semantic field of honour. So rather than saying this is how you will behave, which he's done earlier, he's reiterating the lesson by saying this is how you will not behave. So we have over enthusiasm and killing, cowardice, shunned, shame. Easy. Okay, last little bit of the speech. So obviously we're finishing off with that inspirational tone, but again, authoritative and commanding. So we've got this interesting declarative statement at the beginning, which feels a bit ambiguous in terms of where it comes. It is not a question of if, it's a question of when. So we've got this really interesting syntactic parallelism, and the contrast in the declarative complex is through those juxtaposing conjunctions, if to when, so from uncertainty to certainty. This we assume is describing the urgency, because if you think the belief, going back to context, was that there was this huge gap between what the UK have and Iraq has in weaponry, and he's talking about the fact that they are stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. He's saying them using that is inevitable. Yeah, so it's going to happen. So it's adding more purpose to this invasion entering, you know, and it's creating a sense of urgency. And again, the same idea is created here in this conditional. If we survive the first strike, we will survive the attack. So again, it's saying how important they are moving in at this moment in completely and utterly destroying the threat that they pose. And then he moves away from the threat, and then suddenly it's about actually who are we as for ourselves. Okay, so this little sort of adverbial phrase here, bringing it back to the kind of personal. And then we've got this imperative. Let's bring everyone home and leave Iraq a better place for us having been there. So again, he's reminding the soldiers that they are visitors, that they are just here to liberate. And their main goal is getting home safe and leaving Iraq in a good situation. And then one final, simple, declarative sentence. It's a call to action, okay? Even though it's not imperative, it still functions as a call to action. Our business now is north. So it's like, right, off we go. But notice it's that final euphemistic metaphor, business. That's how he describes in this final moment invading Iraq. It's business. That is a much more distanced way of looking at it. Okay, that's it from me. As always, I didn't go through every single line, so if you've got any questions about bits that I didn't cover, just chuck them in the comments and I'll get back to you, or have a little look at Elise Faller's run through, because she does a fully annotated text. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. That would be massively helpful to me and to you, because you'll get notifications of when the rest of the videos are ready. And I will be doing some videos on exam practice as well. They'll be coming up as soon as I finish this collection. Anyway, enough from me. Thanks for watching. Happy revising.